Welcome. Welcome to Stories with Lynn. Stories with Lynn are warm stories. My friends say that they're memorable. They urge me to share them with you. I hope you find them refreshing. I hope you find them a lift for your day. Oh, and be forewarned, because there may be a surprise in them. Because don't all good stories have a surprise in them? Welcome. Welcome to Stories with Lynn. Isn't it good news about Pete? My grandmother-in-law, Francie, was a gentlewoman. She floated through life with equanimity and a graceful demeanor. She loved playing bridge, but I never heard her utter a cross word regardless of how the cards fell, or even at some unconscionable gaffe by one of her partners, me included. She'd just shrug her shoulders, smile, and say, "Okay, whose deal is it now?" Truthfully, she wasn't much of a homemaker. When the grandkids came visiting and there was nothing in the refrigerator, she'd merely smile and say, "Okay, let's go out to eat," which bothered the grandkids not at all. Now, this is not to say that she wasn't a good mother and wife. All of her children were very successful, as was her husband. So she certainly did many things right. She just didn't let the small things get to her. Her unflappable attitude served her well in life. My in-laws, Patty and Hal, would invite Francie to come to their home frequently, especially for holidays and family celebrations. She no longer liked to drive at nighttime, so one of the kids would be delegated to pick her up at her apartment near Akron and bring her to the festivities here in Cleveland. When I joined the family, I became one of those resources. So, this time, I'm the one. I jump in my car, trundle the 40-some miles down to Cuyahoga Falls, get buzzed into her apartment, bundle her up, put her in my car. I go around to the front of the car, get in, and just as I'm buckling my seatbelt, I look over, click goes the seatbelt, and say, "Isn't it good news about Pete?" Oh, I have to suspend the story here. You have to meet Pete. Pete is one of the nicest men you'd ever want to know. Navy veteran, long time Goodyear tire and rubber worker, gentle, wouldn't hurt a soul, head over heels and utterly devoted to his beautiful wife, Ida. Pete was also the quietest man I've ever known. Not only was his volume just above a whisper, but he didn't waste it with many words. I never, in all the times I was with Pete, ever heard him tell a story, even something simple, like what he purchased at the hardware store. Which is not to say he wasn't popular. He was. He was always welcomed at parties, always engaged wordlessly in conversation, laughed at all the right times. Pete's laugh was silent, but his shoulders would shake up and down. And then he and Ida would leave entirely too soon. Oh, boy, wasn't it good to see Pete? Oh, such a peach of a guy. So Francie, armed with this knowledge of Pete, looked over to me and said, "What news about Pete?" Suddenly alarmed, I said, "Oh, you haven't heard?" Oh my, I don't know if I should be the one, my words trailed off. "Well, he's out of jail." We drove on down the highway, her struggling to process this new information. A bit further along, after we got on the freeway, I casually said, yeah, I think he's off drugs. You know, drugs will make people do crazy things. But, you know, with all of his time in the slammer, I think that broke the cycle for Pete. I don't think he's into that scene anymore. About 5 or 6 miles later, I added, you know, just mentioning, I don't think he's a beaten Ida anymore. You know, that was probably the drugs, because I haven't heard anything more about him a beaten Ida. And so, every so often on that trip, after a piece of that road had gone by, I'd throw another stick on that fire. Yeah, I think he's off the sauce. Now there's a guy that can put it away. Gin. Yes, gin is what I think it was. Oh, that gin is wicked, wicked stuff. But he's kicked it. Best I know. Well, by the time we reached the Cleveland house, Francie's eyes were as big around as if she had been dealt a 7-no-trump bid cold in her hand. She hustled into the house, into the kitchen, and blurted to Patty and Hal, "Isn't it good news about Pete?" Patty and Hal looked at each other. Silent Pete, nicest guy in the world, must have crossed their minds. What good news did you hear about Pete, Francie? Oh, he's out of jail. Oh, I see. Francie, where did you hear this good news about Pete? Lynn told me. As all eyes turned to me, I threw up my palms and portrayed on my face an expression of innocence that any penitentiary resident would recognize. Francie turned full to face me and leveled me with, well, possibly 2 of the strongest words she ever uttered in her life. Horses patoot! Or words to that effect. That story has become a favorite family story, even to Francie, after a time, that is. I told it to Pete, and he absolutely loved it. He laughed heartily, his shoulders shaking up and down silently. And each time I saw him again, I'd say, "Heard good news about you." Good man, that Pete. Thank you for joining me at Stories with Lynn. You can help me. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. That's the lifeblood of these channels. Share this with your friends. Please comment. Tell me what this story invoked with you. What memories did this story bring forth with you? And if you know of other wonderful stories that you would like to hear and see on Stories with Lynn, please put that in the comments. Thanks again. Thank you for joining me at Stories with Lynn.